Boys and girls, welcome back to the Bad Decision Motorsports channel. My name is Jim, your host, and today we're going to be looking at what things we're going to be doing to the engine now that we started to reassemble it. We've got the heads on, we've got the valley cover on. We kind of dry fitted the original intake manifold, but today we're going to look at, do we make things look better before we put this engine back in the van? So, as with anything else, like if you do a home remodeling project, you make something look nice, you got some shiny parts on it, should we go ahead and paint this thing? So I started to explore that idea and did kind of some needle scaling on the block and cleaned it up. So I think we're going to throw some color on this thing before we jam it back in the van. So the next step is to kind of prep this block and get it cleaned up for some paint. Okay, we're starting to reassemble this engine, and just wanted to mention the colors that I used. I used a Rust-Oleum product, high heat primer, gray primer, and then a ceramic orange-red Rust-Oleum, 10 bucks a can. So for 40 bucks, we made this engine look a lot better. Again, if you're starting to bolt on shiny parts and you didn't clean up the block, at least if this thing starts leaking oil everywhere, we'll know where the oil leaks are because it's bright orange now. So happy enough with the engine color, and we're going to start putting these parts back on it. Started to put these shorty headers on. Not sure how everything's going to fit as I get it into the van, so I wanted to go with these shorties. And then I can just add as things go along. But these were, I think, 100 bucks for a pair of shorty headers. So even if I don't use them, no big deal, I'll save them for another project. But I wanted to kind of see how things started to fit. So start bolting everything back on this thing, and next I'll be showing you the motor mount so that we can start lifting this thing up underneath the van and figuring out how we're going to bolt it on. Okay, we've got some of the assembly done on the engine now, and we're going to take a break from assembling this and work on the brakes on the van. Now, I'm waiting on a few parts for the motor mount, but I just want to take you around this a little bit and kind of show you what we've got going so far. So we've got a new water pump on it, new alternator, but in planning this belt path, I realized I need an idler in here. We've deleted a lot of the factory stuff that was on here, but my belt path is going to go through here, and I really need something that is, I believe, spring loaded on this side, so that a tensioner rather, to tension the serpentine belt. So that's a challenge that we have to overcome. I'm not going to fully put this intake on because I think I need to put the lifting plate on to get it off the engine stand. So while I wait for some parts to come in, we're going to move on to the brakes on the van. So what I'm planning for the van is just front brakes. Got a whole new axle that's coming in next week to replace the factory axle. So the plan is just to have drum front brakes. Now, I may learn that I'm going to push through the brakes, but that's just something I have to figure out. I don't know if the front drum brakes are going to hold it to be able to start a burnout, but we just have to figure that out. So I bought all new shoes for the front. I bought a new master cylinder, new cylinders for each brake, and new brake lines. So should be able to get the front brakes. They work right now, but I figured these old lines and everything are going to blow out the first time I do anything with it. So I'm just going to give the front brakes a health checkup and go through them all. The other thing that is a little sketchy that we're going to replace are the spring packs. If you take a look at these, this is some kind of homemade clamp on here. So I think the first time this thing wheelies, and it just might, and I come down on these springs, they're probably just gonna say goodnight. So probably gonna get these spring packs either redone. There's a local company here in Milwaukee that will just go through them and replace anything broken and replace all the spacers. So I might do that. I wasn't able to find just brand new ones online for a 66, but I think Milwaukee Spring here in town will be able to take care of it for me. And we're probably going to do the rear springs as well, just by the same company, because they look pretty sketchy too. So, with a whole new rear end back here, we might as well replace these springs. So this is gonna go next, but I'm waiting for that to come in before we start tearing this apart. Okay, I've got the brakes disassembled and I'm starting to reassemble one of the drums. And I also did a few things off camera with brake lines. I want to take you in on that and show you. So I removed all the old brake lines and replaced the master cylinder and started to bend new lines. Hadn't ever done that before. Bought a tool to bend it and started bending lines. So you can see this is the main line coming from the master cylinder. They had steel. They didn't have copper in the size that I needed to come out of the master cylinder. So I used steel for that going into this T, and then the rest is copper. For this build, I'm only going to use front brakes for right now. I do need to find out if that's going to pass tech when we get to a burnout competition, but for right now, I'm going to leave the possibility to go to rear brakes. This is the T, so I could come off of here or cut the line right here and turn the T upside down and then run to the back brakes. This didn't turn out as good as I wanted it to, but I think it's fine. I might end up redoing it. But really just needed all new hard lines. And then the soft lines going to the new wheel cylinder. So new wheel cylinder, and I did this side so you can see all the brake hardware. I really just had to figure it out. I took pictures of everything as I took it apart, but then went back and referenced my pictures. I haven't done drum brakes in probably 15 years, so got this one all assembled, and now we're going to do the other side. Okay, after watching me struggle getting all those pieces and parts on, springs and everything, I'm so glad that disc brakes were invented, because these are just a pain. I'm sure if you do them all the time, it's a piece of cake and you have the right tools, but it's just really fighting to get the springs back into all the correct positions and get it back together. So we're done. We'll throw the drums back on. Okay, so last part of the brakes is to run one last line over to the left side. So I'm going to come up out of here, bend a 90, and then another 90 and take it over to the frame rail, and then follow the frame, and then we're going to come down underneath and loop into this soft line adapter. So I'll show you the tool that I'm using to make those bends, and we'll just kind of do this together to get it over there. All right, so for the bends that I've done so far, I went to O'Reilly's and got this EverTough tubing bender, and this is actually a rental. It's 67000. If you return it within 48 hours, there's no charge. For the 15 bucks, I decided to keep it. I will look into, I'm sure there's different models that are smaller here so that it makes a tighter bend, but you can see this tool can bend up to 3/8 or 1/2 inch tubing. But I'd like to get a little bit smaller one that I can bend, a tighter bend on it. So to do the first 90, let's see if I can show you here. We're just going to put the tube and then just start wrapping it around until you get a 90. So it just depends on how well you keep it against the shape, how good the bend is going to be. So that's our first 90. This copper clad or copper really bends well. All right, so hopefully you can see these bends. You got a 90 there over to the frame rail. So I'll end up putting some P-clips on it, and then another 90. And I kind of freehand bent this one, and I used the tool over there, so I probably could have, did something a little bit better. Then if you come on this side, now I've got to put a 90 on that and get it into the fitting. So this should be pretty interesting. I probably could have bought, a little bit longer line. So let's see if I can get it done. All right, it's Saturday and it's a balmy 50 degrees out, raining. Perfect weather to go back inside and work on the project. Okay, we left off on the brake lines, and after the camera battery died, I went ahead and started working on the shocks. Now, I would like to have on here, I am going to replace these springs because they're sketchy, but they're on order, so we're going to do the shocks first. So I removed the old shocks, got the top mounted, and you can see, well, we got a ways to go for them to reach. That, by the way, that bolt broke off, and I had to drill that out, which is what all that is. So I'm going to put the wheels back on and set this thing down, and then the shocks should line up. So we'll see how that goes. These are supposed to be the right shocks, but obviously those shocks were a little stretched out and tired, so let's see what happens. Well, after lowering it down, I realized these aren't the right shocks. I grabbed the rear shocks out of the box, and you know, I didn't read directions, which isn't a surprise to the 3 ladies that are watching right now. So yeah, I got to take these off and get the right ones on. All right, that looks a little better. And what we're going to do is cut this plastic strap, and the shock is going to extend down, and we're going to time it to put that bolt in. All right, new shocks, new brakes, new brake lines, new master cylinder, new tires, of course. I just feel like there's something missing though. But anyway, this thing is really close to being a daily driver. Okay, moving on to some of the other things that have to get done, and there's a lot that I want to try and get started today, is mounting this fuel cell. So my theory is I'm going to mount this fuel cell underneath the vehicle, cut a hole in here, and really just keep, you know, everything flammable, at least underneath the van. And then of course I can access this. This is a foam filled tank, so the fuel ideally won't slosh around when I'm spinning the vehicle around doing a burnout. So we'll learn something if it doesn't work, I guess. I'm not sure why they give you more than 2 inlet outlet. You know, you've got inlet and return. I assume that's the one I want to use. But maybe for different applications they give you these. So I think what we're going to do is take those caps off. That'll be my AN lines going to my fuel pump, which they're pretty big, which I'm going to have to convert something. So I'll have to drill holes for those fittings to come up through when I cut the main hole. And then 4 long bolts to hold the tank up from underneath, and that part of it should be done. But just trying to check boxes off because there's just a lot to be done here, as you can see. Okay, now that I've got the tank roughed into place, I've got it on a jack, I'm holding it up. Now my next issue is how to drill the bolt holes for the tank. And you can see the bolt flanges. These were really meant to probably bolt inside of a trunk, but what we're going to do is run a long bolt down to that flange on all four corners. So what I'm going to do is take a welding rod in a drill bit, run it up through this hole to mark the sheet metal so I can get the tank exactly where I want it and be able to just drill it with, you know, after I take the tank down out of the way. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, we got a little further with fabrication. I'm going to show you the radiator mount that I started to make. You can see we finished the fuel cell, so that's in. And now I'm starting to make the radiator mounts. Got these machine brackets here on each side, and then a piece of angle steel that I had laying around. And what I'm going to do, I have this cut so that I can match the angle of the back panel here, and then I'll stitch that back together once it's bolted on. And then this will be removable to get the radiator out. So it's cut again on this side to make this angle work. And right now it's just pinched on the radiator, but I'm going to either run a bolt through or just a bracket that's going to come down over the top and capture it. Put a little bit of rubber in here. I'm going to paint all this after it's welded, but that should capture the radiator. Probably got to come in here and open this up a little bit for the cap. And then having to cut this out has made it a little bit weak, so I'm going to come back in here and weld a brace on this so that it doesn't want to bow out on me. So just going to tack these brackets in place and then drill these upper bracket holes. So made a lot of progress. Well, boys and girls, that's going to do it for this episode. Next episode, we're going to be putting the engine in the van and setting the transmission. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.